So basically, by the way, I'm just reading speech here, but there is really no point in sort of, dancing around the fact that the Catholic Church is in a state of crisis today, and I'm not pretending that this is not the case. But the only rubric that was given to me about this topic is to speak positively about the traditional liturgy, and that is what I intend to do. So, I know that you, having been here for this Mass, have come here with a certain degree of friendliness and acceptance of the traditional liturgy. So the question here is, how are we going to then communicate our love for the traditional liturgy to other people, and particularly for those who are in school here, because you're only going to be here for 4 years, you're going to come in contact, especially in this town, with a lot of people who are going to carry a lot of hostility to the church, and a lot of hostility to the faith, and so, and I'm very much convinced that the traditional liturgy offers us a lot of opportunities to evangelize people, and that one of the major ways the traditional liturgy does this is through the culture which it creates, and the culture which creates, in many respects, the traditional liturgy. So, and so I'm going to start with a quote. That's the beginning of the exile of Black family of Tobias is sent out into distant lands in the Syrian Empire. This beautiful story, which we'll be reading this coming week, the Divine Office, of how Tobias and his family suffer adversity and prosper afterwards with the help of an angel. A friend of mine converted to Protestantism, he got his first Catholic Bible he read was Tobias, which is the first of the Apocrypha. He said, "Why did they take this out? This is like the best book in the Bible." And there's this wonderful canticle, which was actually made part of the Divine Office by Pope Pius X, in the Breviary Reform, in which Tobias says to, speaking to the Jewish people, "He has scattered you among the Gentiles who know him not, that you may declare his wonderful works and make them know that there is no other Almighty God besides him." This is the role which we as Catholics, scattered through this Protestant nation, and living in a church in crisis, this is the role that we play, is to make known the Catholic faith to the rest of the world. And so, as anyone who's been to Italy, I spend most of my time in Eastern Catholic there. So, but as I said, I wanted to speak deliberately about the entirety of the liturgy, not just the Mass. Because the Mass is like the sanctuary of the church. It's the focal point, it's the greatest part of the church. But you can't have a church that is called a sanctuary. You need to have a nave and pillars, the stained glass windows, for all the years next to this. My colleague of mine, liturgical movement, so you need belfries and baptistries and side altars as many as possible. All of these things together form the church. There is no such thing as a church which is just a sanctuary. And the liturgy is not just the Mass. The liturgy is also the Divine Office. This is one of the great treasures which the church possesses, the office, and one of the most neglected things in the church today, sadly, the Divine Office as far as I'm concerned, are liturgical seasons. And traditional Catholics, we have a very, very rich series of seasons in the traditional liturgy. We know that Adventists, not just the Latin word for Christmas shopping, Adventists, not the Latin word for diet, and the Rosary, which is really going to come back these days, thank God. Blessings, both seasonal and occasional, blessings to the church. Now, this is the benediction, which is also making a great comeback. This very largely based on the second processions. And so these are really wonderful things. So that what I want to talk about is the liturgy as a whole, all of the things that the church has given us to enrich our relationship with God. And I would call this the culture of liturgy. Now, the word culture derives from Latin for to cultivate something, but also to worship. This word means both worship and cultivation. So when we cultivate, in what sense are we cultivating God? We're not causing God to grow, except that we are causing him to grow someone once gave me a beautiful description of the way a pious Jew lives, where everything is preceded by a blessing. You go everywhere in public with your head covered. And you always wear, the tzitzit and the pants and all of these things. Is the way of surrounding yourself at every single moment. There's something that reminds you of your relationship to God. And for us, as Christians, it's the totality of our liturgical life. So not just Mass. One of my favorite examples of the efficacy of a non-Mass, or a non-Eucharistic thing, in conveying the Catholic faith. When I was a freshman at college at Yale University in Montreal, very second, Yale is not a Catholic school. And the dorm scene there, when I was there, it was a major part of that reason. But on Ash Wednesday, my freshman year, a whole bunch of us went to the Newman Center for Mass, which was really bad. But it was a great car. You were seeing this video on YouTube. But it was awful. But we came back to but we all came back to the church. One thing which was good about it is that it wasn't just that, some kind of smudge, it was like big. We all come back to the cafeteria, although the Catholic contingent from this, and we're all sitting together at dinner towards the end of the dinner period, so we're pretty much the last people left in the cafeteria. And a friend of one of the guys who was in this group, not a Catholic, walks up to this buddy and says, let me see. So the guy turns to him and shows him the big cross of words, and he laughs in his face, and in a way that was definitely kind of hostile. And then walks away. And one of the other people at the table said to him, there's very no and one of the people at the table said to him, hey man, don't worry about it, Jesus said that, anybody who's, mocked for the sake of my name will be rewarded in the kingdom of heaven, which is, kind of raw paraphrasing what Christ said, but, that very simple episode really struck me as something, because it showed you how such a simple gesture, as receiving ashes on your forehead on Ash Wednesday, the power of that gesture. Any Catholic priest will tell you that Ash Wednesday is the busiest day of the year. Catholic priests in the south of the United States will tell you that, Bible-believing Baptists who do not have much trouble with the Catholic sacramental system will come to churches and receive ashes on Ash Wednesday. There's, from my experience, a beautiful example of the real power of these things to communicate the Catholic faith to people. And so, the other important thing about this word holiday is that it often appears, if it's read, it means to remember. And culture as an act of recollection, those words are not actually connected, as an act of remembrance, is another very important thing. Our liturgical culture is what helps us remember who we are as a people and what we believe as a church. And the Bible contains a number of very, vivid examples, like in the Exodus, when the children of Israel, the very same ones, crossed through the two walls of water on the other side, which is where Moses goes, one of God's more Testament. These are the very same people who, less than 20 chapters later, they're the ones who are worshiping the golden calf. And we have, a number of very long psalms which talk about the forgetfulness and how easy it is to forget God. And in this world we live in, it is easier to forget God and religion. We have a lot of distractions in this world. We have a lot to keep us entertained. People will tell you all the time, priests will tell you, well, people went to church because there wasn't anything else to do. Well, that is kind of true. It's not the only reason they went to church. But people did go to church because it was one of the things that was there to do. That was where the music was, it was where the most beautiful stuff to see, the most beautiful artworks, and so and that's not a bad thing. That is part of what helps us to remember God. I would also like to add that it's a common habit nowadays to speak about all of this stuff as something accessible to young people. And so just to point out to the world that it's sort of young people we might even give this talk. And the average age of the people in here. And it's great that they're older people here too. communicates culture, but also how the liturgy has created culture. And so from a sort of theological point of view, first of all, one of my favorite examples of this, one of the things I hate most about going to churches where they have modern music is if I see a drum kit in the sanctuary, I know it's going to be a bad day. So, and you know that for a very, very long time, this is something which was one of the essential rules about music in church, was that percussive instruments of any kind, including the piano, were not allowed in church. The instruments that were allowed in church were, of course, the human voice, organs, and string instruments, or pipe and wind instruments, following like the organ and string instruments. These are the instruments that imitate the function of the voice. And the reason, the theological reason behind this was always understood that the human reason, the highest expression of our human reason is the use of our voice. We're the only species that talks. And our use of the word and reason is the most appropriate way for us to worship the Word. That Greek word that St. John uses to talk about the pre-incarnate second person of the Trinity, logos, it derives from the Greek word that means to speak or to say. Logos is that. It means word, but it also means reason. So the tradition that we don't use percussive instruments, that we only use instruments that imitate the function of the human voice as an expression of human reason, is a theological reason. As a sort of via positiva, a positive aspect of this. It is an expression of our sort of theological belief that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, that He shares our human nature. And so, and that the most appropriate way to worship Him is as an expression of what it is about us that is like Him, and what it is about the liturgy that brings us to Him. Via negativa, which is fun, even Plato identified long before Christianity that percussive instruments work with the rhythms of the body. And so, dance music. So they encourage the body to act in a way that denies the reason. He called this corbats. So the Corabantes were a sect that kind of whipped themselves up into a frenzy through dancing and drum-like musical instruments. Prophet Elisha pushed the ball off the cliff. So he was right to do so. So there you have a theological reason for, both in the positive sense and the negative sense, of why a particular type of instrument, the use of a particular type of instrument was prohibited in church. And whenever you impose these kind of rules on musicians, they have to sort of work and develop within the rules. And so, this is church, this praying, and then Archegum and Palestrina and Victoria, and so Victoria was able to do the most perfectly wonderful things without having to use the drum. So that's a nice example of how music becomes an expression of our theology. And I'll just give you one other example, much more basic level. I once attended a seminar on Gregorian chant, in which the priest was talking about this. Compared a couple of antiphons and found several words in various places, Dominus, Christus, Jesus, Salvator, with the same notation written on. And he said, you see how this is expected. You see, if your little brain can figure out how these little notes tell you you're talking about God, and that Jesus is God, and Christ is Savior. You can figure this out. So it was a beautiful little talk. So that's another example of music as an expression of theology. Another very important aspect of this is music as an expression of our history as Catholics. And this is one of my favorite stories of all time. I once accompanied a Protestant minister to Vespers at St. Peter's on the 5th Sunday of Lent, when they were in Rome. This is something which is very, very much worth seeing. It's a beautiful Vespers Sunday. At the end of which, the canons process out of the sanctuary. And then they go up into one of the giant pillars that holds up the pillar of St. Veronica. The room behind the balcony. They keep an object venerated as the veil I did a new comment over the Lenten hymns, and I was doing kind of commentary, church commentary. And I explained, well, this hymn is one of the traditional Lenten hymns, and it's supposed to have been, written, traditions that have been written by St. Ambrose. And he says, let's see Ambrose. Let's say Ambrose. From the 4th century. So then we have the Psalms, and so, well, this song is the first song of Sunday. This other song,